That's it. Trash, let go. Just minutes ago, she was just a quiet black student at a rundown high school on the edge of Detroit. Now she's being tortured to death on a railing 200 meters above the ground, all because she saw something she wasn't supposed to see. But they don't know she's never been alone. From the darkness behind them, a massive figure in Hell's Angels leather steps out. The laughter of the town's golden boys turns instantly into desperate, pathetic screams. What could possibly drive these privileged princes to murder a poor girl just to silence her? Drugs? Dirty money? Or a corrupt empire their fathers, the sheriff and the principal, have built for years? And when the entire town turns its back, who will stand with the girl they call trash? Don't blink. You're about to watch the moment these arrogant bullies drop to their knees and beg for mercy. Where are you watching from? And what's the worst bullying you've ever seen or heard about? Drop it in the comments. I read them all. Let's get started.
The silence inside Lincoln High School after dark was heavy, almost suffocating. It clung to the cracked linoleum floors and the peeling paint of the hallways like a shroud. This decaying building stood as a crumbling monument to a forgotten American dream, perched on the rusting outskirts of Detroit. For most students, the final bell meant escape, a frantic dash toward freedom. But for Aaliyah, the school was a refuge. It was the only place quiet enough for her to hear her own thoughts. At 17, she carried the weight of the world in her faded backpack. Her clothes were second-hand, washed so many times the fabric had gone thin and soft, yet she wore them with a quiet dignity that kept others at arm's length. She was the invisible girl, the one who sat in the back row, who always knew the answer but never raised her hand. Her survival strategy was simple: stay unseen. Her mother worked double shifts at construction sites, coming home with hands cracked and bleeding just to keep the rent paid. Aaliyah studied late into the night because failure was unthinkable. Failure meant being trapped in the same grinding poverty that was slowly draining the life from her mother. The library clock ticked past 7. The janitors were working on the far side of the building, leaving the east wing deserted. Aaliyah packed her books, ignoring the familiar growl of hunger in her stomach, and stepped into the dimly lit corridor toward the exit. The air grew colder as she passed the condemned old boys' locker room, a section boarded up for renovations that never came. That was when the smell hit her. Sharp, acrid, and sickly sweet. It sliced through the stale mix of floor wax and dust. This wasn't the usual skunky marijuana scent that drifted from the bathrooms at lunch. This smelled chemical, like burning plastic and death. Aaliyah froze. Instincts honed from years in a neighborhood where one wrong glance could cost you everything screamed at her to keep moving. But a thin blade of yellow light cut across the dark hallway floor from the slightly open locker room door. She edged closer and peered inside with one eye. The room was a ruin of rusted benches and leaking pipes. In the center, beneath a single dangling bulb, stood the two boys who ruled the school, Connor and Tyler. Their varsity letterman jackets gleamed like armor under the harsh light. Connor, son of Sheriff Harlan, had the kind of handsome face that charmed teachers and a cruelty that terrified freshmen. Tyler, the principal's son, was his hulking shadow. They weren't just smoking. Between them, on a rusted bench, sat an unzipped duffel bag, the real source of their power. It was packed with vacuum-sealed bags of marijuana. But what turned Aaliyah's blood to ice were the smaller, clear packets beside them, filled with white, chalky powder. Fentanyl. The word burned in her mind like poison. It was the plague ravaging her neighborhood, turning strong men into hollow shells. And here it was being weighed and packaged by the sons of the town's law and authority. Tyler picked up one of the bags, tossing it nervously while his eyes flicked toward the door. "They said to cut this batch heavy," he muttered, voice echoing off the tiles.
We gotta stretch it. That 10th grader last week, the one carted out in an ambulance, he almost didn't make it. Too pure." Connor laughed, a low, empty sound with no trace of humanity. He took a long pull from his vape, exhaling a cloud toward the ceiling. "If they die, they die," he said coolly. "Just proves the product's strong. Junkies pay extra for the risk. You worry too much, Tyler. We're untouchable." A wave of nausea surged through Aaliyah. They were discussing murder like a business deal, killing kids and hiding behind their father's badges. She had to get out now. She took a careful step back, eyes still locked on the deadly powder. As she shifted to run, crunch. The small sound exploded like a gunshot in the dead quiet. Her sneaker had crushed a shard of broken glass from an overhead fixture. Inside the room, the conversation cut off instantly. Aaliyah stopped breathing. Her heart hammered against her ribs with violent force. She did not wait to see their reaction. She turned and sprinted, moving with the desperate, silent speed of a hunted animal, her rubber soles gripping the linoleum as she rounded the corner into the main atrium. The locker room door slammed open against the wall. Connor stepped out into the hallway, his eyes scanning the darkness. He was calm, predatory. He did not run. He knew the building was locked from the outside and that his prey could only go so far. The hallway appeared empty, shadows stretching long and undisturbed. "Hello," Connor called, his voice mocking and playful. "Come out, little mouse. We just want to talk." Silence answered him. He walked forward, heavy boots echoing. He stopped at the corner where Aaliyah had stood moments before and looked down. There on the dusty floor lay a small object. It had fallen from her pocket in her panic. Connor bent down and picked it up. It was a bright pink plastic hair clip, chipped at the edge, the kind sold cheap in bulk at discount stores on the wrong side of the tracks. He turned it over in his hand, feeling the jagged plastic. Tyler came up behind him, breathing hard, panic in his eyes. "Did you see who it was? Did they see the stash?" Connor stared at the hair clip, a slow, cruel smile spreading across his face. He recognized it. He'd seen it holding back the unruly curls of the quiet girl who sat in the back of history class. The girl who never spoke. The girl who wore the same clothes 3 days in a row. He brought the clip to his nose and inhaled mockingly. "I know exactly who it was," he whispered, eyes gleaming with malice. "I can smell the poverty from here." The following morning, Aaliyah moved through the crush of bodies at Lincoln High with her head down, hugging her textbooks against her chest like a shield. Aaliyah kept her breathing shallow, eyes glued to the floor tiles as she counted her steps toward first period. She almost reached safety. Turning the corner by the stairwell, a notorious blind spot in the school's cameras, nicknamed the dead zone by students, a heavy arm crashed against the lockers just inches from her face. The metallic bang echoed like thunder. Aaliyah flinched and froze in place. Before she could back away, another body blocked her retreat from behind, trapping her. The air felt suddenly thin and suffocating. Connor stood in front of her, looking even more menacing in the daylight than he had in the shadows. His varsity jacket hung on him like a badge of arrogance, his cold blue eyes empty of any feeling. Tyler loomed behind her like a silent watchdog, sealing off any escape. "Going somewhere?" Connor asked, his voice low, smooth, and chillingly casual. Aaliyah tried to sidestep, but he mirrored her perfectly, pinning her against the icy lockers. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the cheap pink hair clip. He held it up to the fluorescent light, slowly twirling it between his fingers. "You dropped something," he said with mock politeness. "Found it in the locker room. Funny place for a girl like you to be snooping around." Aaliyah stayed silent. Her heart pounded wildly, but she clenched her jaw tight, refusing to let him see her fear. "Cat got your tongue?" Connor sneered. Then, in a flash, his relaxed mask vanished. His hand struck like a viper, seizing her throat, fingers digging deep into her windpipe. He slammed her back against the lockers and hoisted her up until her feet dangled helplessly. Her books spilled from her arms and scattered across the hallway floor. Pure instinct kicked in. She clawed desperately at his wrist, nails raking his skin, but his grip was unbreakable. He was a linebacker built on rage and privilege. She was a girl who often skipped meals to stretch the budget. Her vision tunneled, black spots swirling at the edges. "What did you see?" hissed Connor, his face inches from hers. "Tell me exactly what you saw, you little rat." Aaliyah gasped for air that wouldn't come, lungs burning like fire. She couldn't speak even if she wanted to, yet her eyes stayed fierce, radiating a hatred far older and deeper than his spoiled cruelty. A voice suddenly boomed from down the hall. Connor's grip loosened just a fraction, though he didn't release her. Aaliyah glanced past his shoulder. Hope flared briefly in her chest. Mr. Whitaker, the history teacher, was approaching with a stack of papers in hand. The same man who preached daily about the civil rights movement, resisting tyranny and the meaning of justice. He stopped 10 feet away. Aaliyah tried to cry out, but only a strangled wheeze escaped. Her eyes screamed for help. Mr. Whitaker saw her dangling, face turning purple. Then he looked at Connor, the sheriff's son, the weight of political influence, school board donations, and the danger of crossing that family. His gaze shifted uncomfortably. He adjusted his glasses and fixed his eyes on a spot on the wall above Connor's head. "Keep the horseplay down, boys," Mr. Whitaker said, flatly, without emotion. "Bell's about to ring. Get to class." Then he turned and walked away. Something inside Aaliyah broke, not a bone, but her fragile belief that the world was fair. The man who taught courage had just ignored a brutal assault out of fear. Connor laughed, a dark, guttural sound. He released her. Aaliyah crumpled to the floor, gasping and gulping air like a drowning survivor. She rubbed her bruised throat, coughing hard. Connor crouched down, his breath hot against her ear. "See? Nobody cares. You're a ghost. If you talk, next time I won't just choke you, I'll make you disappear." He kicked her history book down the hall, laughed again, and strolled off with Tyler. The walk home felt endless. The autumn wind cut through Aaliyah's thin jacket, but she barely registered the cold. She was numb inside. She unlocked the door to their cramped apartment. The familiar smell of bleach and stale cooking oil greeted her. On the worn sofa, her mother, Monique, lay asleep, still in her neon construction vest. Muddy boots on, her cracked and bleeding hands rested on her chest from another grueling day hauling concrete. Aaliyah stood over her, watching the slow rise and fall of her mother's breathing. Monique worked 60 hours a week just to keep a roof over their heads. If Aaliyah told her about the drugs and the sheriff's son, Monique would march to the school and fight. Then Sheriff Harlan would find a way to get her fired, evicted, or worse. Her eyes drifted to the small framed photo on the mantel. A proud black man in military uniform, metal gleaming on his chest. Her father, Phantom. He had survived wars overseas, only to come home and die slowly from an illness the VA refused to treat properly. He had taught her the world was cruel to people like them, that all they had left was honor and grit. The system hadn't saved him, Aaliyah thought, and the teacher hadn't saved me. She walked to the tiny kitchen, opened a drawer, and stared at the utensils. Her hand passed the spoons and forks, closing around a small, sharp paring knife, old with a worn wooden handle, but the steel blade still keen. She returned to her backpack, wrapped the knife in a towel, and tucked it deep into a hidden pocket. She wouldn't tell her mother. She wouldn't go to Principal Vaughn. She was finished waiting for protection from men who only protected themselves. If the wolves came again, she would no longer be prey. She would be a fighter. The Rusty Anchor was a refuge for long-haul truckers, rough bikers, and anyone looking to drown their troubles in cheap whiskey. But tonight, in the shadowed back booth, the two self-proclaimed kings of Lincoln High sprawled across the cracked red vinyl. Connor and Tyler slouched lazily, a pitcher of cheap beer between them. They were underage, but in this town, the law bent for anyone with the right family name. The bartender knew better than to card the sheriff's son. Connor took a long swig from his glass, wiping the foam from his mouth with the back of his hand. A cruel, triumphant laugh escaped him, chilling the already dim room. "Did you see her face?" he asked, leaning toward Tyler. "When I hoisted her up, her eyes were practically bulging out." "She looked like a fish flopping on a hook." Tyler gave a nervous chuckle, fingers drumming anxiously on the sticky tabletop. Bigger and broader than Connor, he was built like a tank, yet his eyes always carried a flicker of worry. "She was terrified," he admitted, though without Connor's vicious enjoyment. "But what if she talks? Whitaker saw us. The girl definitely saw the stash." "If she goes to the police, who's she gonna tell?" Connor cut in sharply, slamming his glass down hard enough to slosh beer over the rim. "My father is the police, you moron. And Whitaker? That guy's got a mortgage and a pension. He's not stupid enough to cross us." Connor leaned back, arms spread wide like he owned the place. "We're untouchable here, Tyler. Stop acting so weak." Suddenly, the heavy rear door creaked open on rusty hinges. A blast of cold, rain-scented wind swept in, carrying the faint trace of expensive cologne. The bartender instantly busied himself polishing a glass. A tall figure stepped from the shadows. He wore a long charcoal overcoat that stood out sharply against the sea of denim and leather. Moving with rigid, furious purpose, he ignored the bar and headed straight for their booth. Tyler straightened, his face going pale. "Dad!" Principal Vaughn emerged into the weak glow of the hanging lamp, nothing like the warm, inspirational figure who delivered morning announcements about integrity and school pride. His expression was twisted with raw fury. "You idiotic, reckless brats!" Vaughn hissed through clenched teeth. He swept the pitcher aside and planted his knuckles on the table, leaning in close, voice a menacing growl. "I told you to keep it discreet. The locker room is for storage, not your little hangout." Connor didn't even flinch. He just looked up with bored indifference. "Relax, Vaughn. We took care of it. She's just a nobody." "A nobody who could bring everything down if she talks," Vaughn snapped, glancing around to make sure no one was listening, before dropping his voice lower. "Do you have any clue what's arriving next week? The suppliers are sending a shipment worth more than this whole school district. Pure product, fentanyl, cocaine, enough to run things for a year." Principal Vaughn drew a shaky breath, eyes flicking between the boys. "If that girl opens her mouth right now, if she draws any attention, the entire operation collapses. And hear me clearly, even though your father wears the badge and thinks he owns this town, not even Sheriff Harlan can shield you forever if the feds get wind of it. He'll throw you both under the bus to save himself. I'm the one who'll burn for this." This was the revelation that would have nauseated any parent in town. The man charged with shaping their children's futures wasn't merely turning a blind eye. He was the mastermind, driven not by fear of the drugs, but by fear of losing the money. Connor stared at him for a long, silent moment. Then his lips curled into a predatory grin. "You worry too much, old man," he said softly. "She's not a problem. She's an opportunity." "What are you talking about?" Vaughn asked, frowning. "She's nothing," Connor replied, voice laced with venom. "A black girl from the projects, dead dad, mom who cleans for a living. If she vanishes, who's going to care enough to investigate? The police? My dad runs them. The school? You run it. The media? They don't waste time on people like her. She's just another statistic." Connor pulled out his sleek black phone, the screen's glow lighting his cold features. "I'm going to stage it as an accident," he went on calmly. "A tragic mistake. A poor, troubled girl wanders onto a construction site. Maybe she slips. Maybe she jumps. Doesn't matter." What are you doing? Tyler asked, uneasily, watching Connor's thumbs move across the screen. Setting the bait, Connor answered. He opened a spoofing app to hide the sender ID and typed in a number lifted from the school's emergency contacts, Aaliyah's mother. She's a mama's girl, isn't she? Let's see how fast she comes running when she thinks mommy's hurt. He entered the message. Help! Accident at the old tower site. Trapped. Can't move. Come alone, please. His thumb hovered over send. He glanced at Principal Vaughn, waiting for the adult to finally draw a line, to say this had gone too far, that murder wasn't part of the plan. Vaughn stared at the phone, then at the fear in his own son's eyes, then back at Connor. Make sure it's clean, Vaughn whispered at last, and make sure she never comes back to my school. Connor pressed send. Class dismissed, he said with a grin. The old skeleton tower, known to locals as a relic of broken promises, stood as a 20-story shell of steel and concrete, abandoned 3 years ago when the money ran out. The abandoned tower loomed on the barren northern outskirts of town, where the streetlights gave up and the night took over completely. Aaliyah arrived, gasping for breath, lungs on fire after sprinting 3 miles. The fake text from Connor, disguised as her mother, had cut straight through her reason and hit her deepest fear. Help! Accident! She didn't stop to question it. She just ran. She vaulted the chain-link fence, ignoring the faded no trespassing signs, and plunged into the black stairwell. No elevators, only rough concrete steps buried in dust and debris. Aaliyah climbed, legs burning in protest, driven solely by the nightmare vision of her mother injured and alone in the dark. 10th floor, 15th, 20th. She exploded onto the rooftop, a wide, unfinished slab of concrete strewn with rusted rebar and tarps whipping wildly in the howling wind. Up here the gale was merciless, screaming through the steel beams like tormented spirits and swallowing the faint city sounds far below. "Mom!" Aaliyah shouted, but the wind ripped the word away. "Mom, where are you?" The roof was deserted. Then slam! The heavy fire door she'd burst through crashed shut behind her, the echo booming across the concrete. Aaliyah whirled, dread pooling in her gut. Connor and Tyler emerged from behind a massive ventilation unit. "You really are predictable," Connor yelled over the roar of the wind, strolling forward with hands in his pockets. "You ran all this way because a text told you to. No second thoughts, just an obedient little puppy." Aaliyah backed up until her heels struck the edge, the void of a 200 meters drop yawning behind her. "Where is she?" Aaliyah demanded, even as the awful truth settled in. "Sleeping on her couch, probably drooling on a pillow," Tyler sneered, moving to flank her. "But you're about to have a tragic accident." The full horror crystallized. They hadn't come to threaten her. They had come to end her. "Let me go," Aaliyah said, forcing her voice steady and drawing on every last reserve of strength. "I won't breathe a word about the locker room. I just want to go home to my mom. Please, Connor, walk away. We can pretend this never happened." It was a desperate plea for mercy, a final reach for whatever shred of decency they might possess, but there was none to find. Connor laughed coldly, nodding to Tyler. "He thinks she can bargain," he mocked. "Thinks her silence is worth something. The only silence we can trust is the permanent kind." They rushed her. Connor seized her shoulders and shoved her backward toward the drop. Tyler ripped off her thin denim jacket, leaving her in just a t-shirt against the biting wind. "Has to look real," Connor growled, eyes shining with twisted invention. "A struggle, maybe an assault gone wrong, or a suicide. Poor girl, overwhelmed by poverty." Tyler lunged again, massive hand reaching for her throat to pin her. He expected helpless prey. He was wrong. In that instant, Aaliyah didn't see Tyler. She saw her father, Phantom, in the backyard on quiet Sundays before the illness took him, his strong hands guiding hers, teaching her leverage. "Size doesn't matter, little one," he'd said. "Balance does. Surprise does." Tyler's hand was inches away. Aaliyah exploded into motion. She stepped inside his reach, pivoted hard on her back foot, torqued her hips, and unleashed a brutal uppercut into the soft spot under his jaw. Crack! Tyler's head snapped back, teeth slamming together with a sickening clack. He staggered, eyes unfocused, stunned by the ferocious strike from someone he'd dismissed as weak. Connor roared in shock and grabbed for her hair. Aaliyah was already moving. She seized his wrist with both hands, dropped her weight low, spun her back to him in a perfect judo hip throw, ogoshi. Using his momentum against him, she hurled the star athlete through the air. Connor crashed onto the concrete with a thud that drove the breath from his lungs. Aaliyah scrambled clear, hands trembling but precise. She yanked the small paring knife from her jeans' hidden pocket, 3 inches of dull steel that gleamed like a sword in the moonlight. She raised it in a wide stance, eyes fierce. "Stay back," Aaliyah screamed. "I swear I'll cut you." For one stunned moment, both boys stayed down, staring in disbelief. The mouse had fangs. But the shock faded fast. Aaliyah was 5'4" and barely over 100 pounds. Connor and Tyler were football players, pumped with adrenaline and humiliated rage. "You bitch!" Tyler spat, blood on his lips. "You're dead!" They charged as one. Aaliyah slashed wildly to hold them off. She caught Tyler's forearm, opening a shallow but bright red line. The pain only fueled him. He ignored it and bulldozed forward, crushing her guard. His massive hand clamped her knife wrist and squeezed until bones ground together. Aaliyah cried out in agony. She twisted desperately, trying to drive the blade home, but something deep inside stopped her. She wasn't capable of killing. That split-second hesitation was all it took. Tyler wrenched her wrist viciously. The knife clattered away, and he kicked it over the edge into the night. "Hold her!" Tyler bellowed, face twisted with fury. Connor scrambled up, murder in his eyes. They seized her arms, hoisted her off her feet. She kicked, bit, screamed until her voice shredded, but their strength overwhelmed her. They dragged her to the brink, where the wind wailed like a death canal. The moment of truth arrived. Aaliyah faced annihilation at the hands of 2 monsters wearing human faces. No dramatic final showdown, no villainous monologue. Connor simply smiled, placed his palms on her shoulders, and pushed. Aaliyah tumbled backward into empty air, yet the will to survive runs deeper than terror. As she tipped backward over the ledge, Aaliyah's hands flailed desperately in the void. Her fingers caught a rusted I-beam protruding from the concrete edge. The abrupt halt was savage. Her shoulders jerked violently, ligaments straining nearly to tearing, but she clung on. She hung there, swaying in the icy blackness. Far below, the city lights formed a cold, uncaring grid that seemed impossibly distant. Her legs pedaled uselessly against nothing. The corroded steel gnawed into her palms, rust flakes cutting like tiny blades. Above, a shadow blocked the moon. Connor stepped right to the brink, gazing down not with panic, but with the detached fascination of a boy toying with a trapped bug. "Impressive!" Connor bellowed against the wind. "Most girls would have dropped by now." "Pull me up!" Aaliyah rasped, voice raw and breaking. "Connor, please pull me up!" Connor's laugh cut deeper than the cold. And miss the fun part? No way. He raised his expensive boot, the heavy sole hovering threateningly over her white-knuckled fingers. He didn't crush them right away. Instead, with deliberate cruelty, he lowered his weight slowly onto her knuckles, grinding in the filth and pressure. Agony exploded through her hands, a grinding force that felt like it would shatter the fragile bones. "Beg me," Connor hissed, crouching close until his face was inches away. "Admit you're nothing. Beg for your life." Through waves of blinding pain, Aaliyah met his eyes. Tears blurred her sight, but her resolve held firm. Visions of her father's quiet strength and her mother's scarred, bleeding hands surged through her, igniting a defiance stronger than terror. She refused to die pleading with a coward. Teeth clenched, she locked her gaze on his with pure, frozen hatred. "Go to hell." Her words shattered his smirk. Rage contorted his features into something inhuman. "Wrong choice," he snarled, slamming his heel down with full force. The boot crushed her pinky against the jagged metal. A sharp, sickening crack rang out even over the howling wind. A scream ripped from Aaliyah's throat as her left-hand grip failed, fingers slipping free. Now she dangled by one shaking arm alone. He lifted his foot again. Last chance. Say I own you. Aaliyah stared at the blood streaming down her wrist, then back at the boy who believed himself untouchable. Silence was her only reply. Enraged, Connor stomped again, pulverizing her remaining fingers against the steel. The pain overwhelmed everything. Her hand opened against her will. She fell. For an instant, Connor watched her terrified eyes vanish into the swallowing dark below. Then she was gone. He stepped back, breathing hard, face flushed with the dark thrill of victory. He turned to Tyler with a manic, triumphant grin. "It's done," he said, brushing his hands together as if erasing a trivial mess.
"Problem solved. We killed her," Tyler whispered, staring at the empty ledge, frozen by the sudden gravity of what they'd done. "She slipped," Connor corrected sharply, arrogance thick in his tone. "Tragic accident." He tilted his head back and laughed, the sound bouncing harshly off the concrete walls. In that moment he felt invincible, a king in his own warped empire. But in his rush of triumph, Connor missed the faint tremor running through the rooftop under his feet. It wasn't the wind. From deep in the stairwell rose a low, rumbling growl that swelled into a deep, bone-rattling roar, the unmistakable thunder of a Harley-Davidson V-twin climbing the ramp like an avenging beast. The fall wasn't the endless void Aaliyah had braced for. It ended in a brutal, air-stealing impact against forgotten construction debris. 5 floors down, a heavy-duty safety net, left behind by the bankrupt builders to catch falling tools, stretched across the open shaft of the 15th floor. None of them had noticed it earlier, hidden in the murky shadows. Aaliyah slammed into the coarse nylon mesh with the force of a wreck. The thick ropes bit deep into her skin, whipping her head back and driving every ounce of breath from her lungs. She couldn't even scream. She lay tangled in the orange webbing like a shattered marionette, coughing weakly, every inch of her body howling in pain, suspended over the black drop below. She was alive, but caught. Far above, Connor leaned over the edge, expecting to see a broken body on the distant pavement. Instead, he spotted faint movement in the net below. His victorious grin faded into cold irritation. "She's still moving," Connor muttered, no trace of mercy in his voice. His gaze swept the roof and locked on a jagged chunk of concrete beside a pile of rebar, heavy enough to rip straight through the old netting. He hoisted it overhead, muscles taut, lining up the fatal drop to finish the girl who wouldn't stay dead. "End it," he whispered to himself. Connor planted his feet to hurl the block, but it never left his hands. From the stairwell shadows, a massive figure emerged, not with the engine's roar, but in deadly quiet. A towering man in weathered leather that had outlasted decades, the faded death's head patch of the Hells Angels clear on his back. Uncle Rex didn't waste words. He charged like a runaway train, smashing into the quarterback with earth-shaking force. Connor flew sideways, skidding across the rough concrete. The block tumbled from his grip and shattered harmlessly against a vent duct. Connor gasped, clutching cracked ribs, staring up in raw terror at the giant now looming over him. Tyler, stunned motionless by the explosion of violence, tried to scramble away. Uncle Rex spun with surprising speed, his huge hand closing entirely around Tyler's neck, lifting the linebacker clear off the ground as if he weighed nothing. Tyler's legs kicked futilely, eyes bulging in panic. Rex flung him aside like trash. Tyler slammed into the stairwell wall and wheezed, too frightened to move.
Ignoring the boys for the moment, the biker rushed to the edge and peered over, his scarred, bearded face softening with urgent fear. "Little one!" His deep voice echoed down the shaft, thick with emotion. "Hold on, Uncle Rex is here." Trapped in the net, Aaliyah looked up through tears and agony. She knew that voice, knew the old scar on his cheek from half-buried childhood memories, before her father fell ill, before hardship swallowed everything. The revelation struck like lightning. Her father hadn't only been a soldier discarded by his country. On the streets, he was Phantom, a feared and respected legend in the Hells Angels, a man who commanded loyalty from the toughest outlaws in the state. For years, the club had kept his final wish: let her grow up normal, keep the life away from her, but never let her walk unprotected. They had been the unseen shadows at the edge of her vision, silent sentinels honoring a promise. Until tonight. Uncle Rex turned slowly back to Connor. The boy was crawling backward on hands and heels, breath coming in panicked gasps, searching wildly for any way out. The biker advanced, his shadow swallowing the terrified teen. The rooftop air grew thick with impending violence. Rex didn't raise his voice. He spoke low, the gravelly rumble vibrating in Connor's bones. "You made a fatal mistake, kid," Rex growled, eyes black with rage. "You didn't just hurt some girl from the projects. You tried to murder the princess of the Hells Angels." He cracked his knuckles, the sharp pops ringing like a final verdict. "Your life ended the second you laid hands on her." Rex moved with unexpected gentleness down to the 15th floor, slicing the heavy netting with a serrated combat knife, and carefully pulled Aaliyah from the brink. He carried her battered body back up the stairs, cradling her against his leather vest as though she were fragile glass. Once Uncle Rex gently lowered her onto the concrete roof away from the deadly drop, the softness in him vanished. He turned toward the corner where Connor and Tyler lay crumpled and groaning, slowly recovering from the devastating force of his arrival. Rex strode toward them, his heavy boots pounding the surface like the approach of judgment itself. He reached inside his jacket and drew out a thick steel chain, methodically wrapping it around his scarred fists. "They threw you off a building, little one," Rex growled, voice shaking with barely contained fury. "The law won't touch the sheriff's son, but I will. I'm going to end what they started." He raised his wrapped fist, ready to deliver a fatal strike to Connor. "No!" Aaliyah's voice was faint, almost lost in the wind, yet it carried absolute authority that froze the giant mid-swing. She pulled herself upright, cradling her ruined hand to her chest. "Don't do it, Uncle Rex," she rasped. "If you kill them, you go away for life. They win. I don't want them dead." Rex turned, confusion flickering across his hard features at her unexpected mercy. "They tortured you." "I know," Aaliyah replied, her eyes gleaming with cold, calculating fire. "And death is too quick. I want them alive. I want them to suffer. I want to strip away everything they have." Before Rex could answer, blinding red and blue lights flooded the rooftop. Sirens wailed below, screeching to a stop at the tower's base. Doors slammed. Tactical boots thundered up the stairwell. Connor, wiping blood from his split lip, blinked awake and saw the flashing lights dancing across the steel. A twisted, bloody smile spread over his face. He spat out a broken tooth and glared up at Rex. "You're finished, biker scum," he laughed, the sound wet and ragged. "My dad's here. You attacked miners. You kidnapped us. By sunrise, you'll be in an unmarked grave no one ever finds." The fire door exploded open. Sheriff Harlan charged onto the roof with 4 SWAT officers, rifles raised, spreading out to cover Rex's chest with red dots. "Drop it!" the sheriff bellowed, pistol aimed at Rex's head. "On your knees, or I drop you right here." Rex stood firm, positioning himself as a shield in front of Aaliyah. Connor scrambled to his father, playing the terrified victim. "Dad, he's insane! He tried to kill us! Shoot him!" Harlan's finger tightened on the trigger. He saw the perfect story. Dead outlaw, dead witness, traumatized son. A few shots, and it would all disappear. Last rites, Harlan muttered. I wouldn't, Aaliyah said calmly, her voice cutting through the chaos. She wasn't looking at the weapons. She was staring at a narrow fissure in a concrete pillar, 10 feet from where Connor had tormented her. What'd you say? Harlan snapped, glancing toward her. Don't shoot, Aaliyah repeated, lifting her good hand to point with a steady, trembling finger. You have an audience. Tucked deep in the crack, nearly invisible in the shadows but perfectly angled, was a smartphone, its recording light pulsing steady red. When your son trapped me up here, Aaliyah continued, voice growing stronger, I knew I couldn't overpower him, so I set up a witness with help from Malik in the AV club. He rigged remote streaming on this old phone, boosted the signal, and made sure the battery held. It's been streaming live to the Lincoln High student page for over 20 minutes. Connor's face drained of color. 1,500 followers, she declared, staring straight into Harlan's eyes. They watched your son crush my fingers. They heard him brag that you control the police. And right now, they're watching you aim at an unarmed man who just saved my life. Harlan froze. He looked at the phone, then at his gun. The truth slammed into him. He wasn't hidden anymore. One pull of the trigger would be murder broadcast live across town. Heavy silence fell, broken only by radio static. Verify the feed, Aaliyah challenged. One SWAT officer lowered his rifle and checked his wrist device. He looked up, face ashen behind the visor. Sir, she's telling the truth. Over 2,000 viewers now. Comments are demanding the FBI. Harlan slowly lowered his weapon. Veins throbbed in his neck, rage and fear across his face. He had lost the darkness he'd always hidden in, exposed by a 17-year-old's foresight. Stand down, he ordered through gritted teeth, holstering his pistol. His glare never left Aaliyah, burning with pure hatred. You think you're smart? He hissed, stepping closer while ignoring his son. Think a video ends me? It ends you killing us tonight, Aaliyah answered unflinchingly. Enjoy your little win, girl, Harlan snarled, waving his men to secure the scene. But you just declared a war you can't possibly win. This game's barely started. Good, Aaliyah whispered as he turned away.
The clubhouse stood as its own sovereign territory on the edge of Lincoln, untouchable by the town's rules. Uncle Rex thundered through the fortified gates on his Harley, gravel crunching beneath the tires as he pulled up close to the entrance. He killed the engine without waiting for it to cool and scooped Aaliyah into his massive arms, kicking the thick steel door wide open. Inside, the air hung heavy with the smells of motor oil, old tobacco, and unbreakable loyalty. The room went dead quiet in an instant. 20 men in worn leather vests froze mid-pool shot or conversation. These weren't casual weekend riders. These were hardened veterans with gray beards and bodies etched by scars from battles the history books never recorded. Rex carried her to the center and gently lowered Aaliyah onto a battered leather couch. Get the medic, Rex ordered, his deep voice low but absolute, and lock the gates tight. We've got company. A weathered biker with a snow-white beard, known only as Patch, once a combat medic in Vietnam, hurried over with a well-stocked kit. As he carefully cleaned the blood from Aaliyah's crushed fingers, the others closed in around them. They didn't eye her with the menace she'd always feared from shadows. Instead, their gazes held a deep, almost reverent recognition. She's got his eyes, one old-timer murmured, leaning on his pool cue. Looks just like Phantom, damn it. Welcome home, little one. Another pressed a bottle of water into her hand with a gruff nod. Your old man saved my hide back in '98. You're safe here. For the first time since the tower, Aaliyah let her defenses drop. She wasn't prey in this place. She was bloodline, the daughter of a legend in an outlaw kingdom. But the calm shattered quickly. Click! The overhead lights flickered once and died. The refrigerator's hum stopped cold, and the jukebox music faded into a final groan.
Darkness swallowed the clubhouse, broken only by moonlight slipping through the barred high windows. "Power's cut," Rex announced, hand moving instinctively to the knife on his belt. "Water, too," Patch confirmed from the sink, twisting the faucet to a dry hiss. "They severed the mains." Outside, the night ignited in flashing red and blue. Strobe lights swept across the interior walls, casting the bikers' faces in alternating crimson and sapphire. Alea limped to a window and parted the blinds. It was a full siege. Sheriff Harlan hadn't come for arrests. He knew the live stream had crippled any chance of direct assault without a warrant. Instead, he'd chosen siege warfare. Dozens of cruisers ringed the perimeter in an unbreakable blockade, SWAT vans idling at every exit. They weren't storming in, they were choking the life out slowly. A megaphone crackled to life outside. "This is a restricted zone," Harlan's amplified voice boomed. "We're investigating suspected drug trafficking. No entry, no exit. Surrender the girl for questioning, and we may restore utilities." A cold knot tightened in Alea's gut. Not fear for herself, but guilt. She scanned the room. Men loading shotguns from beneath the bar, checking magazines, ready to defend their ground despite being heavily outnumbered. The corrupt law stood on the other side of the fence. "I brought this down on you," Alea whispered, turning to Rex. "He wants me. If I walk out or if any of you do, you vanish." Rex cut her off, placing a massive hand on her shoulder. "You think this is just about you? It's about power. Harlan hates anything he can't own or destroy." "He hated your father, and he hates us." "But they'll starve us out," Alea protested, voice shaking. "They've already cut water. They could torch the place." "Let 'em try," Rex growled. "This clubhouse has survived 3 gang wars and a federal raid. We don't kneel to badges." Defiance crackled through the room like electricity. Yet Harlan understood patience was its own weapon. He didn't need gunfire. He only needed time to wear them down in the dark. Then, without warning, glass exploded inward. Crash! A heavy object hurtled through the reinforced front window, shattering the pane and thudding heavily onto the floor in the center of the room.
The bikers sprang into action, weapons up and ready for tear gas or a flashbang, but nothing detonated. Uncle Rex strode calmly to the object. It was a brick bound with a rubber band around official sheriff's department stationery. He picked it up and unfolded the paper. In the pulsing red and blue glow from outside, his face hardened into a mask of raw fury. "What does it say?" Alea asked, moving closer. Rex didn't speak. He just passed her the note. Scrawled in thick, furious black marker was a blunt ultimatum that abandoned all pretense of legality. "Hand the bitch over in 10 minutes, or we torch the whole hive." The threat marked the height of their arrogance, yet the Harlan and Vaughn families had overlooked one crucial truth: justice doesn't vanish forever. By morning, the hallways of Lincoln High had become a stage for calculated denial. The viral live stream exposing Connor's brutality had been erased from the internet with chilling speed. The school board, hiding behind policies on cyberbullying and deepfake manipulation, labeled the video an AI hoax. Morning announcements pushed the official line, a vicious prank aimed at student leaders, but the students knew better. They had witnessed the blood, heard the bones break. Connor strode through the main doors not as an outcast, but as a victor, daring anyone to challenge him. His varsity jacket gleamed under the harsh lights, knuckles bruised, jaw set, eyes scanning for defiance. He paused beside a freshman, whispering to a friend at a locker. Without a word, he leaned in close, crowding the boy's space until tension thickened the air. "Watch any good movies last night, Timmy?" Connor asked softly. The freshman shook, clutching his books tighter. No, Connor, I didn't see anything." "Smart kid," Connor smiled, slapping the boy's cheek just hard enough to sting. "Because rumors get people hurt. Accidents happen." He moved on, cutting through the crowded hall like a predator through prey, gaslighting the entire school and counting on fear to silence the truth. But in the dim AV clubroom, surrounded by humming servers and tangled cables, one student watched without fear of fists, only of injustice. Malik was a shadow in Lincoln High's hierarchy, the tech kid who fixed projectors, the nerd who ate alone in the server room to dodge cafeteria chaos. He was invisible to types like Connor, but invisibility became power when stalking monsters. That night, under a starless sky, Malik slipped toward the besieged clubhouse. The police cordon focused on the front, lights strobing against the fence, but he knew the town's backways better than any cop. He crawled through the muddy drainage ditch behind the compound, shoes soaked, hugging a waterproof case to his chest. Reaching the darkest stretch of rear fence, a rough voice barked, "Freeze!" Malik halted. Uncle Rex emerged from behind stacked tires, shotgun loose in his arm. The biker looked worn, eyes bloodshot from the standoff, but his aim never wavered. "I'm not one of them," Malik whispered, hands raised. "I'm a student from Lincoln." Rex lowered the barrel slightly, peering through the gloom. "You're far from class, kid. 10 seconds to explain before I throw you back." "I've got the phantom files," Malik said, voice steady despite the tremor. Principal Vaughn erased the security footage from the local server. He thought it was gone, but the district system backs up to off-site Proud every 24 hours. I have admin access. Rex holstered the shotgun and opened the side gate. He pulled the boy inside, out of police view. "Prove it," Rex ordered. Malik opened the case, powered up his battered laptop, and skipped the rooftop clip. Instead, he loaded footage from 3 weeks earlier, midnight at the school's rear loading dock, timestamp authenticated. A black, unmarked police SUV rolled up, trunk popped. Connor and Tyler appeared, but they weren't unloading drugs. A uniformed officer handed them the duffel. The camera zoomed. The officer turned, Sheriff Harlan himself. "It's a pipeline," Malik explained, pointing. "He sees his product from rivals, logs half as evidence, funnels the rest to his son for school distribution. They're not covering crime, they're running it." Rex stared at the screen, rage boiling like magma. This was irrefutable proof, tying assault, drugs, and corruption into one ironclad chain. "Why?" Rex asked, looking down at the slight teen, risking everything for outlaws he barely knew. "Why stick your neck out for us?" Malik glanced toward the clubhouse window where Aaliyah rested. He pushed up his glasses, hands still shaking from adrenaline. "Last year, Connor dumped my backpack in a toilet. Everyone laughed, teachers too. But Aaliyah pulled it out, dried my books. She didn't mock me. She said smarts are a weapon if you wield them right." Resolve hardened his voice. "She saw me when no one else did. Tonight, I make sure the world sees them." Rex laid a heavy hand on the boy's shoulder. Not menace, but solemn acceptance. "Come in, kid. We've got a fight to plan, and you just delivered the heavy artillery." Inside the fortress, Aaliyah viewed the footage. The terror that had gripped her on the rooftop ebbed, replaced by sharp, icy focus. She was no longer merely a survivor. She commanded an army, armed with truth, and now Harlan's own crimes in crystal-clear video. "We stop playing defense," Aaliyah declared, snapping the laptop shut with a sound like a hammer falling.
"We take the fight to them." The deserted parking lot of the 24-hour supermarket stretched like a bleak sea of asphalt under the buzzing orange haze of sodium lights. At 2 in the morning, the only movement came from stray shopping carts rattling in the wind and a solitary red Mustang convertible parked far from the entrance. Tyler sat rigid behind the wheel, fingers clamped so tightly on the leather steering that his knuckles gleamed white. Engine off, radio silent, he stared at the darkened store doors, trapped in a spiral of paranoia that had haunted him since the rooftop. He wasn't Connor. He couldn't switch off his conscience like flipping a light. Every time he blinked, he saw Aaliyah's fingers, heard the sickening crack of bone echoing in his dreams. He checked the rearview mirror for the 10th time in a minute. Nothing but empty dark. He exhaled shakily, reaching for the key. Then the darkness behind him erupted with a guttural roar. A huge silhouette filled the space behind the car, not another vehicle, but a Harley idling with a deep, threatening rumble that vibrated through the Mustang's frame. Uncle Rex sat astride it, face lost in shadow, his sheer presence an immovable wall. Tyler gasped, fumbling for the locks, but before he could hit the button, the passenger door flew open. Aaliyah slipped into the seat beside him. No mask, no weapon, just her plain denim jacket and heavily bandaged hand. She regarded him with a calm that chilled him more than any threat. "Drive," Aaliyah said quietly, "but not home. Kill the engine." Tyler froze, eyes darting between her and the massive biker blocking his escape. He was caged by his own choices. "What do you want?" he whispered, voice breaking. I tried to stop him. You heard me tell Connor to stop." Rex lowered the kickstand and swung off the bike. He approached the driver's window slowly. No shattering glass, no shouting, just leaned in, scarred forearms resting on the frame, looking at Tyler like a father disappointed beyond words. "You watched," Rex said, voice rough as gravel. "In my world, the guy holding the light is just as guilty as the one swinging the blade." Rex reached into his vest. Tyler flinched, expecting steel. Instead, Rex drew out cigarettes and a lighter, sparked one, the flare briefly lighting the hard planes of his face. He took a drag and exhaled into the night. "Big man on campus, huh, Tyler? Varsity jacket, principal's kid? You strut those halls thinking you're a wolf, but you're not. You're a pampered pup running with coyotes." "I can't help you," Tyler pleaded, tears rising. "Connor, his dad, they'll kill me." "Let's talk about where you're headed," Rex continued, ignoring the begging. "Think the sheriff can shield you forever? Maybe here, but the feds are circling. When Rico hits, you won't see county lockup, you'll go federal." Rex leaned closer, tobacco and leather filling the car. "Know what happens to pretty rich boys in there, Tyler? No Letterman jackets, no daddy on speed dial. You'll be fresh meat for sharks who haven't seen soft in 20 years. And Connor, he'll flip on you for a candy bar to save himself." Tyler broke, sobs ragged and pitiful. The bully mask crumbled, exposing the scared kid underneath. Aaliyah watched without sympathy, only cold recognition of his weakness. "We don't want you," she said, turning to him. "We want the pipeline. We know your father moves the product, and Connor distributes it. We need the location." "I can't," Tyler sobbed. "Two choices," Rex said, flicking his cigarette away. "Option 1, you stay quiet. We walk. Tomorrow, I personally send the video of you watching Aaliyah being tortured straight to the FBI. 20 years as accessory to attempted murder and trafficking. Option 2, you give us the stash location. We dismantle them. You flip for the state. Probation, new name, fresh start somewhere nobody knows you." Tyler looked from Rex to Aaliyah, eyes lingering on her bandaged hand. He saw they lived by a code he'd never grasped, one of real consequences. He wiped his face and drew a trembling breath. "The RV," Tyler whispered. "Dad keeps an old Winnebago at the Lake Michigan campground, Lot 42. Supposed to be for fishing, but we never fish." "That's the stash," Aaliyah pressed. "Everything," Tyler confessed, words tumbling now. "Pills, cash, ledgers. He rotates it monthly, but it's there tonight." Rex nodded once, satisfied. He tapped the Mustang's roof twice. "Good call, kid." He turned toward his bike. "Wait," Tyler called, face ghost white under the lights. Rex paused. "Be careful," Tyler said, voice quivering with fresh terror. "It's bigger than the sheriff. Dad doesn't get it from street dealers. The suppliers are Russian, Provich Syndicate. He launders their money through the school renovation funds. Hit that RV and you're not just robbing a principal, you're robbing the Russian mob." Aaliyah glanced at Rex. The danger had just leaped from small-town corruption to a potential death warrant. Russians, Rex muttered, a grim smile tugging his beard. Always did hate vodka. Armed with Tyler's confession, Aaliyah and the bikers began crafting a precise counterstrike. Lincoln High School at 3 in the morning.
Lincoln High at 3 in the morning was no longer a school. It was a tomb for shattered dreams. The hallways, normally alive with the loud chaos of teenage life, now lay drowned in a heavy silence that made every heartbeat echo. Aaliyah glided through the shadows of the administration wing, her steps soundless on the glossy linoleum. At her sides were 2 young Hells Angels prospects, Jax and Rook, both hungry to prove themselves and earn their full patches. They wore plain dark hoodies and tactical gloves instead of their cuts, melting into the darkness like ghosts. Though Tyler had revealed the drugs were hidden in the RV by the lake, Aaliyah had demanded this side mission. Narcotics could be relocated, cash could be cleaned, but the blackmail evidence Principal Vaughn used to control vulnerable students would be kept close, trophies for his ego, not stashed in some camper. He was too vain to hide his darkest secrets anywhere but his own domain. They reached the imposing oak door of the principal's office, the gold nameplate, Arthur Vaughn, M.E.D., catching faint moonlight through the transom. Electronic lock, Rook murmured, examining the keypad. Basic commercial model, give me 30 seconds. He attached a compact bypass tool, red LEDs flashing in a rapid blur. Click. The maglock released with a solid thunk. They eased inside. The air carried the scent of costly wood polish, stale coffee, and cloying vanilla freshener trying to cover the underlying decay. The room was built to dominate, a huge desk that made visitors feel insignificant. Search thoroughly, Aaliyah whispered. Wall safe. Guys like Vaughn are predictable. They bury their filth behind their vanity. She went straight to the awards wall behind the desk. Plaques for Educator of the Year, Rotary President, civic medals, all symbols of false virtue. Her flashlight swept across them until it stopped on an oversized portrait of Vaughn shaking hands with the governor. Instinct flared. She seized the frame and tugged. It swung open on concealed hinges. Behind the smug grin lay a sleek steel safe. Jackpot, Jax breathed. Rook, drill ready. No drill needed, Aaliyah cut in, pulling a crumpled napkin note from her pocket. Tyler's hurried scrawl from the car, listing dates. He uses his anniversary. Try June 12th, 98. Rook entered the code. Green light. The doors sighed open. Neat bundles of cash filled the space, easily 50,000, but Aaliyah ignored it, her gaze fixed on a thick black leather ledger atop the money. She lifted it out and flipped it open on the desk. The contents turned her stomach to ice. Not a drug inventory, a roster of student names. Michael T., 11th grade, debt $450, assignment lookout at Northgate. Sarah J., 10th grade, debt $120 for mother's rent, assignment downtown courier. David R., 9th grade, debt $300, assignment storage mule. Aaliyah turned pages, rage shaking her hands. Dozens of kids she recognized, classmates from biology, the ones branded troublemakers or likely dropouts. Vaughn wasn't merely pushing drugs on them, he was loaning money for basics, food, rent, survival, then ensnaring them in debt. Poverty turned into forced labor for the syndicate. It was modern slavery hidden behind the banner of public education. "They're not dealers," Aaliyah whispered, horror tightening her throat. "They're prisoners." "We need to move," Jax urged, glancing nervously at the window. This was too smooth. "I need proof," Aaliyah insisted. She drew the burner phone Uncle Rex had given her. She photographed pages rapidly, flash bursts lighting the damning entries, names, debts, tasks. Click after click, she documented the heart of the corruption.
The final page showed a wire transfer to a Cayman shell company, signed by both Vaughn and Harlan. "Got it," Aaliyah said, securing the phone inside her clothing. "Let's go." The noise was thunderous, not sirens, but steel fire shutters slamming down over windows and door, metal barriers sealing every exit. Harsh white floods snapped on, blinding them. The silent alarm hadn't called security, it had sprung a trap. From overhead speakers crackled Harlan's voice. "Think we wouldn't guard the vault, you little pest?" The side door to the conference room exploded open. It hadn't been locked, it had been bait. 4 deputies in full tactical kit stormed in, suppressed submachine guns raised. These weren't here for arrests, they were an execution squad. "Ambush!" Jax yelled, shoving Aaliyah behind the massive desk as bullets chewed the wood into splinters. Glass burst, papers swirled like chaotic snow. The office became a death trap in seconds. "No escape!" Rook shouted, firing his small pistol in futile return, the cracks pitiful against the chatter of automatics. Aaliyah pressed flat against the desk, clutching the burner phone that held liberation for 50 enslaved students. Her eyes found the dusty floor vent, tight, grimy, but perhaps their only chance. The lethal pursuit ignited. Uncle Rex's custom Harley screamed like a wounded beast, Redline howling as he slammed into 6th gear. Aaliyah gripped his waist tightly, face buried in the worn leather of his vest, wind ripping at her with violent fury. Uncle Rex's custom Harley screamed like a wounded beast, Redline howling as he slammed into 6th gear. Aaliyah gripped his waist tightly, face buried in the worn leather of his vest, wind ripping at her with violent fury. Behind them, the night exploded into chaos, no longer black, but a frenzy of wailing sirens and flashing strobes. This wasn't a chase, it was a hunt. Their escape from the high school had been a whirlwind of breaking glass and choking smoke, a frantic breakout covered by the Hells Angels prospects, hurling Molotovs and swinging bats to force an opening. Now they tore down the interstate, a dark ribbon of highway cutting through the county's heart. Uncle Rex glanced in his mirror and saw hell closing in. 6 sheriff's cruisers in aggressive pursuit, engines tuned for speed, flanked by 2 matte black SUVs with blacked-out windows, the Russian syndicate's muscle, moving with lethal coordination through the thin late-night traffic, gaining ground with every second. "Hold tight, little one," Rex bellowed over the howling wind. "It's about to get ugly." In the lead cruiser, Sheriff Harlan clutched the radio, knuckles bone white, eyes fixed on the Harley's taillight dancing ahead. He knew exactly what Aaliyah carried on that phone, his ruin, the end of everything he'd built. "Unit 4, intercept now," Harlan barked, all pretense of law abandoned. "PIT the rear wheel. Don't box, just force them off." "Sir, that's deadly force," the deputy crackled back, uncertain. "The rider's a minor." "Run them off the road," Harlan roared, spit hitting the dash. "Code 4, high-speed crash, driver intoxicated. Do it!" The cruiser lunged, turbo whining as its push bar crept inches from Rex's rear tire. Aaliyah twisted to look back, blinded by headlights, the grille looming like jaws. She clutched the burner phone tighter against her ribs. But Rex wasn't riding alone. From the upcoming on-ramp, 4 massive touring bikes merged in perfect formation. The old guard, Duck, Hawk, and 2 other Vietnam-era brothers riding heavy iron in tight diamond pattern. They didn't accelerate to flee, they braked to block, forging a rolling barricade of chrome and steel between Rex and the hunters. "Wall them," Rex signaled with a raised fist. The lead cruiser feinted left. Hawk, the gray-bearded giant on his customized Road King, mirrored it. The cruiser jerked right. Hawk matched again, pipes sparking on asphalt. "Clear the road," the deputy blared over the loudspeaker. Hawk stared him down, flipped a single middle finger, and slammed his brakes. It was suicidal. The cruiser couldn't stop. Metal crumpled with a horrific crunch, the sickening screech of tearing steel and dull impact. Hawk catapulted through the air, a limp silhouette against the lights, then slammed onto the pavement, tumbling in sparks until he lay still in the center lane, blood pooling around him, but his chest rising faintly in labored breaths. The wrecked cruiser spun wildly, smashing into the median in a burst of debris, sealing the lane and halting the SUVs behind. Aaliyah screamed, twisting to watch the still figure recede. The man who'd bought her a soda hours earlier, now possibly gone. "Hawk!" she shrieked, tears torn away by wind. "Rex, turn around! He's hurt! Stop, please! They killed him!" Rex didn't ease off. His grip tightened until the bars creaked, tears tracking into his beard, but his gaze stayed forward. "Eyes ahead, Aaliyah," Rex bellowed over the howling wind. "Don't you dare look back, Aaliyah. Don't you dare." "We can't leave him," she sobbed, collapsing against his back. "He chose it," Rex shouted into the gale, words carried like an oath. "He bought us time. Turn around now and his sacrifice means nothing. You hear me? You carry the proof. Get that phone across the line, or Hawk fought for nothing. Honor him. Keep riding." The truth was merciless, forged in outlaw steel. Mission above all. The Brotherhood shielded the vulnerable, even at the cost of blood on asphalt. Rex twisted the throttle full open. The Harley lunged ahead, abandoning wreckage, sirens, and a fallen brother to the night. Two fugitives raced onward, bearing a digital weapon that could topple an empire, trailing sacrifice too heavy to measure.
They reached the clubhouse sanctuary, but the price weighed more than any of them could carry. One of Aaliyah's uncles lay gravely wounded on the highway, a casualty in a war he hadn't begun. Inside the clubhouse, the air was suffocating, thick with stale smoke, dried blood, and a silence louder than any alarm. Hawk's empty bar stool stood in the center like a silent monument. Aaliyah sat huddled in the corner, shivering beneath a heavy blanket despite the warmth. She watched Uncle Rex pace beside the old wall-mounted payphone, his body humming with a frozen fury more frightening than any gun Sheriff Harlan had ever aimed. Later, that night, word came from a sympathetic ER nurse who owed the club an old debt. Hawk wasn't gone yet. He was critical. Ribs crushed, internal bleeding, hanging on by the slimmest thread, but fighting like the warrior he was. Rex snatched the receiver off the hook. No 911. He dialed a private line unknown to any directory, straight to the Hells Angels national leadership in Oakland. "This is Rex, Detroit Charter," he rumbled, voice like shifting earth. "Code red." A pause. "No, not turf. It's the law. They took down Hawk, ran him off the interstate trying to protect Phantom's daughter." His eyes flicked to Aaliyah. The bruise on her cheek had darkened to an ugly purple, her bandaged hand resting on her knee like evidence in a trial. They touched a child. They tortured a legacy. Phantom's blood. "President," Rex whispered, the words heavy as iron. "They crossed the line. We're under siege." He hung up without another syllable. The call would ripple out like wildfire through the Brotherhood network, favors owed to Phantom from decades past, debts of blood and loyalty cashed in overnight. Nearby chapters were already on alert for weekend runs, others would ride through the night. Rex walked straight to the gun cabinet and began loading shotgun shells with calm, rhythmic precision. Click-clack, click-clack. Dawn broke over Lincoln, not with comfort, but with omen. By 7, the coffee cups in the Main Street diner rattled in their saucers. By 7:30, storefront windows trembled. At 7:15, the sound arrived. Not mere noise, but a physical force, a deep bass roar that vibrated in every ribcage across town. It felt like the heavens ripping apart. From the east, they poured in, reinforcements from Cleveland, Chicago, Indiana, and beyond. Over 200 Harleys riding abreast in formation tighter than any military column, with more trickling in as word spread through the network. Sunlight flashed off countless spokes and helmets worn by men bound by a code Harlan had fatally underestimated. They didn't race, they advanced at a deliberate, threatening crawl, engines thundering in perfect unison, swallowing police sirens whole. Sheriff Harlan stood at his office window, peering through blinds, face ashen. He had braced for a gang, he faced an army, And it wasn't only Hell's Angels, patches of Vietnam Vets MC, Iron Horsemen, even Patriot Guard mingled among the leather. Rex had cashed in every favor, every blood debt Phantom had ever earned. They flooded the streets, sealed intersections, encircled the station and courthouse in an ocean of iron. The real shift came on the sidewalk. Mrs. Higgins, the elderly baker who'd paid Harlan's protection for a decade, stepped from her shop. She studied the bikers, men she'd been taught to fear, then the cruisers blocking the road. She walked into the street and pressed a cold bottle of water into the hand of a tattooed giant astride a road king. "Give 'em hell, son," she said quietly. That small act ignited everything. A decade of suffocating fear dissolved in exhaust smoke. Townspeople, parents of indebted kids, workers long extorted, streamed from homes and shops. They lined the curbs cheering, raised handmade signs, joined the swelling blockade. Deputies behind their barricades stared at familiar faces, neighbors, their kids' teachers. Opposite them stood a wall of riders ready to die for principle. Weapons lowered. The street was lost. Inside his office, Harlan watched his kingdom fracture. Phones rang endlessly, mayor, governor, media. He ignored them, eyes wild, searching for leverage. Only one desperate play remained, cruel enough to save or damn him forever. He keyed his secure radio to his most loyal enforcers. "They want war," he hissed, sweat staining his collar. "Fine, but if they want the girl alive past today, make them pay." "Take the mother," Harlan ordered, malice shaking his voice. "Hit the apartment, grab Monique, use her as leverage." Realizing the town was slipping from his grasp, the sheriff played his last vicious card, kidnapping Aaliyah's mother.
The wide marble steps of Lincoln Town Hall, once a backdrop for parades and speeches, had become a battlefield stage. The morning sun blazed off the pale marble, laying bare the raw ugliness of the confrontation before the swelling crowd. At the foot of the steps stood the army of the overlooked, over 200 bikers, veterans, and weary parents forming a silent barricade of leather and denim. At the top, beneath the towering pillars that symbolized justice, waited the rot that had poisoned the town for years. Sheriff Harlan pressed his back against the massive brass doors, a trapped beast still wearing a badge. His uniform hung rumpled, eyes flicking wildly between the advancing mass and the news choppers circling overhead like scavengers. In his right hand, his service pistol gleamed. The muzzle wasn't pointed at any outlaw. It dug hard into the temple of Monique, Aaliyah's mother. Monique's eyes were wide with terror, work boots scraping uselessly on the stone as Harlan used her as cover. Beside him, Principal Vaughn clutched a briefcase stuffed with cash, face pale as a man watching his last lifeline snap. Connor and Tyler hovered in their father's shadows, stripped of their jock swagger, reduced to trembling boys facing real consequences for the first time. Silence blanketed the plaza, the earlier thunder of engines replaced by suffocating tension. Aaliyah stepped forward from the protective ring of Hell's Angels. She walked alone into the open space between crowd and steps, limping from her injuries but chin high. In her good hand, she carried the black ledger, the record of every trapped student and every dirty dollar. "Let her go," Aaliyah said, voice calm yet carrying clearly across the open square. "Burn it!" Harlan shrieked, jamming the barrel harder against Monique's head. "Toss that book in the garbage now, or I paint these steps red. I've got nothing left to lose." "You have your life," Aaliyah answered, advancing another step until she stood 10 feet from the gun. She met her mother's frightened gaze with steady reassurance, then locked eyes with Harlan. "You think one bullet ends this?" she asked, raising the ledger for every camera to see. "It's already uploaded. FBI has copies, news outlets too. Killing her doesn't erase racketeering, it adds murder one." Harlan's hand trembled. Cold logic cut through his desperation. He was a survivor first, politician second. He understood the odds. "Surrender now and you live. Prisoned but alive," Aaliyah pressed, voice unyielding yet factual. "Pull that trigger and look behind me." Harlan glanced past her. hundreds of men who'd stared down death in jungles and deserts. Uncle Rex gripping a tire iron, knuckles bone white. He knew one shot would unleash hell the thin deputy line couldn't stop. The crowd would rip him apart before the echo faded. "Dad," Connor whispered urgently, seeing the hesitation, the finger easing off the trigger. The boy who'd been taught winners never fold realized his father was breaking to a girl from the projects. "No," Connor hissed. "We don't lose." "Shut up, Connor," Harlan snapped, lowering the weapon slightly, resolve fracturing. "It's over." "Not until I say," Connor screamed in a surge of gold-jacketed fury. He lunged, not at Aaliyah, but at his own father, wrenching the heavy Glock from Harlan's distracted grip. "Connor, no!" Tyler shouted, his voice cracking with sudden panic. Connor gripped the pistol awkwardly, hands shaking with rage, but distance made skill irrelevant. Eyes manic with cornered narcissism, he aimed straight at Aaliyah's chest. "You ruined everything," he shrieked, spit flying. "Filthy rat, you should have died on that concrete." He pulled the trigger. Time splintered. Aaliyah saw the flash, frozen in place, but someone else moved. Tyler, the lifelong follower who'd stood silent while she dangled from the tower and watched her fingers being crushed, finally found courage born of guilt and terror. He dove sideways, slamming into Connor with a desperate tackle just as the shot cracked wide. The bullet missed Aaliyah's heart by inches and found another mark. Uncle Rex had already launched forward the instant the gun changed hands, hurling his massive frame in front of her. The round struck him high in the shoulder, spinning him with a spray of bright blood across the marble. He dropped to his knees with a deep, wet grunt, clutching the wound. "Uncle Rex!" Aaliyah cried, ledger falling as she rushed to him. "Get off!" Connor roared, wrestling Tyler on the ground, trying to swing the gun for another shot. Chaos erupted. The deputy line collapsed. Bikers surged like a leather tide up the steps, but before violence could fully ignite, the sky shattered with rotor thunder. Dust swirled in choking clouds as a black helicopter banked hard overhead, blades battering the crowd. Down the avenue, 3 armored federal trucks smashed through local barricades, scattering deputies. Agents in blue windbreakers with bold yellow FBI letters poured out, weapons up, moving with disciplined speed no local force could match. A massive voice boomed from a PA, rattling windows. "Everyone down! Federal agents!" The long-awaited reinforcements had arrived. But for the man bleeding heavily on the steps, they might have come moments too late. The collapse of the Harlan and Vaughn empire wasn't gradual. It was a spectacular implosion played live on national news. As federal agents flooded the town hall steps, the illusion of untouchability that had shielded Sheriff Harlan and Principal Vaughn for years vanished in seconds. Stripped of badges and guns, they appeared suddenly small and ordinary. Harlan, the man who had ruled the county through fear, submitted without a fight as cuffs locked around his wrists. Head down, face hidden from the people he'd vowed to serve, he shuffled toward the armored van. Beside him, Vaughn sobbed openly, clutching his chest like a man in cardiac arrest, while agents confiscated the briefcase of dirty cash. Connor, however, refused to go quietly. As marshals hauled the fallen quarterback toward the SUV, his predator facade shattered completely, exposing the panicked child underneath. He thrashed and screamed, voice breaking into hysteria. "It wasn't me," he wailed, kicking against the agent's grip. "My dad made me do it. He told me to push her. Arrest him. I'm just a kid." He turned desperately to Harlan for rescue, but the sheriff stared only at the ground, knowing his son's betrayal sealed both their fates. The town watched in silent revulsion as the self-crowned king was tossed into the vehicle like any street criminal. Months later, the courtroom delivered the final reckoning. Aaliyah took the stand in a simple blouse, hand fully healed, posture straight and unwavering. Defense lawyers tried to smear her as a troubled liar from the wrong neighborhood, but she never faltered. She faced the jury, then the orange jumpsuited defendants, and recounted every detail, the drugs, the extortion, the torture on the tower, with the calm precision of a soldier's report. No tears, only unflinching truth. When the gavel dropped, it rang like Judgment Day. Life sentences without parole for Harlan and Vaughn. Tyler faced the bench last, pleading guilty to everything. For his cooperation and his crucial intervention on the steps, he received leniency, 2 years in juvenile detention. As bailiffs led him away, he paused near the prosecution table, met Aaliyah's eyes, nodded once through tears, and whispered, "Thank you for saving me." Aaliyah left the courthouse and went straight to County General. The hospital room carried the sharp scent of antiseptic mixed with fading flowers. Uncle Rex lay propped in the bed, his huge frame dwarfing the white sheets, monitors beeping steady and strong. The shoulder wound was thickly bandaged, but his eyes were bright and alive. She stood at his bedside, the burden of the past year finally slipping away. "We won, Uncle Rex," she whispered, taking his rough hand. "They're gone, all of them." Rex squeezed back gently, a warm, genuine smile breaking through his beard. "You won, little one," he corrected, voice gravelly but tender. "I just held the door." He studied her, seeing the resilient woman forged in hardship. "Your father," he said softly, eyes glistening, "Phantom would be damn proud of the fighter you became."
The graffiti that once defaced the brick walls had been scrubbed clean, replaced by vibrant murals celebrating school pride. Broken lockers were repaired, hallways now bathed in light, the lingering shadow of fear cast by Connor and his father finally banished. The air felt fresh, free of the bitter taste of corruption. On graduation day, the football field gleamed with perfectly trimmed grass, rows of folding chairs filled with parents waving programs against the warm June sun. Aaliyah stood at the podium in traditional blue cap and gown, the gold valedictorian sash draped around her neck. She gazed across the sea of faces, classmates she had fought for, teachers who had rediscovered their backbone, parents who had reclaimed their town. She adjusted the microphone. The hand Connor had crushed was healed, though a faint scar traced her knuckles, a lasting mark of the cost of standing firm. "They taught us history here," Aaliyah began, voice clear and strong. "Wars in far-off lands, revolutions long past. But the greatest lesson I learned wasn't in any textbook." She paused, glancing toward the distant parking lot where the old tower stood silent and abandoned. "I learned porridge isn't the absence of fear. It's being terrified, injured, isolated, yet refusing to yield, because truth is the only thing worth dying for. We aren't defined by the darkness we survive, but by the light we won't let die." A profound hush settled over the crowd. This was no ordinary commencement address about bright futures. It was a survivor's testament. Aaliyah looked to the front row, traditionally reserved for dignitaries and donors. Today, no suits occupied those seats. Instead, a solid line of black leather and denim filled them. The Detroit Hells Angels chapter sitting shoulder to shoulder, bearded faces grave, arms folded. They seemed out of place amid balloons and flowers, yet belonged more than anyone. In the center sat Uncle Rex, his cut worn over a crisp white shirt, shoulder fully mended. As she spoke, he removed his sunglasses and brushed away a single tear with a rough thumb. Beside him, Monique sat tall, clutching roses, pride radiating as she watched her daughter. "Thank you," Aaliyah said softly, eyes on Rex, "for showing me family isn't only blood, it's who bleeds for you." She lifted her gaze to the flawless blue sky, a private smile forming. "I held the line, Dad." The ceremony closed with thunderous applause, rivaling any Harley rally. Caps soared skyward. Aaliyah skipped the reception treats and headed to the parking lot, where the bikers formed an honor guard.
Rex stood beside a gleaming machine, custom Sportster in deep midnight black, subtle gray ghost flames on the tank. Phoenix scripted quietly. "Your dad wanted you in a car," Rex grumbled, tossing her the keys. "But cars have too many walls. You need open wind." Aaliyah caught them, tracing the levered seat. It wasn't mere transportation, it was liberation. Phantom's legacy handed to the girl who'd walked through hell. She passed her diploma to Monique, swung a leg over, donned the matte black helmet, and turned the key. The engine awoke with a deep, pulsing roar that thrummed in her chest. Rex stepped back with a proud salute. Aaliyah revved once, savoring the power, then shifted into gear and released the clutch. She launched forward, leaving spool and tower behind without a glance, merging onto the open road as wind rushed past, sweeping away the final echoes of pain. She rode toward the sinking sun gilding the horizon, no longer victim, witness, or the girl dangling from a ledge. She was Aaliyah, and the endless highway ahead was hers alone. Aaliyah's journey carries a timeless truth. Dignity is a weapon no bully can shatter. She proved true strength lies not in domination, but in weathering the storm until justice emerges. If you held proof against a corrupt empire, would you risk everything to expose it? Tell us in the comments if this tale of triumph moved you.